My first job was as a computer programmer. This was when I was in school, and over a summer vacation, my father got me a job with his company, and I was a programmer. The company was very excited because it had just gotten this new Data General computer, and the Data General had its own room, basically. It was like very air conditioned. And if you were to, in the office, if you were to walk to the lunchroom, you would walk down this corridor and pass the computer room. And if you looked in through the window there, you would see, this big computer. You would see all these tape drives that were sort of the size of a refrigerator, and these IT operations people who would thread the tape through the tape drive and so on. And I was really excited when I learned how to thread the tape through the tape drive. So there was a guy there, the lead programmer. His name was Igor. And Igor was known for, well, first of all, for his dreamy sort of expression. He walked around like this. He had very thick glasses, and his hair was a little bit messed up. And well, Igor, everybody knew Igor was a genius. By which I mean that nobody understood a word that he said, right? But it looked like he read the manual, he knew all kinds of things. And so now imagine that you're a manager at this company, you're in some part of the business organization, and something goes wrong with one of the IT systems. And so you've got to get somebody to fix it quickly. So you go running around looking for Igor, and you finally find him. You figure out which desk he's sleeping under, and you wake him up and you say, Igor, the payroll system is down. This is an emergency. And Igor says, interesting. No, Igor, it's not interesting. People are not getting paid. The payroll system is down. And Igor says, must be the hyper-recursive mastication hyperventilator algorithm. Oh, do you want me to fix it? and you say, yes, Igor, please fix it. He says, oh, okay, just let me finish off this funicular manipulator, because it's almost done. So you're a business manager, and you've been having this conversation with Igor, and you're not sure what just happened. And so you walk away, and you come to a couple of conclusions. The first conclusion is IT people are strange. That's the easy one. The second conclusion is IT people don't understand the business, right? The third conclusion is IT people seem to be focused on hyperventilator masticators or something that doesn't matter, and they're in danger of wasting all their time fooling around with these things, right? The IT people, they're going to be out of control if we don't do something about this. And I don't know how to control them. I don't get what this Igor guy is all about, and I don't know how to give him instructions so that IT is under control. So that's the impression that you'd get as a business manager, I think. Let's call this the early days of IT. You probably think that I'm telling you all this because I'm about to tell you how much things have changed since then. But the truth is, I'm telling you this because I don't think things have changed very much since then in a number of very important ways. And I think, in fact, that the reason why you're having so much trouble doing your Agile transformation or your DevOps transformation, the real problem here is Igor. The real problem is this initial contact with IT that happened. So let's go back right before Igor. You are running a business, and everybody is running around doing their business things, and the business is working, and you're making money, and everything is great. And then all of a sudden, you have this computer room and these strange people who you don't know how to talk to. And so the challenge for you in that case is how are you going to somehow work with this organization and accomplish business objectives even though you've got strange people who you don't understand and can't talk to. So what developed, I think, is a reliance on IT people like Igor. You have to work with them to get your job done. But a challenge now, how are we going to make this relationship work? So here you have the business and IT with these new strange people coming in. And if you're the business and you want to figure out a way to control IT, I have some good ideas for you. Okay, so here's what I would do. First thing I would do is I would say, Igor, I'm the customer. You're the vendor. Your job is to make me happy. If you get good customer satisfaction, that means you're doing a good job. Okay, still don't know what it means, but there's a first step. Second step, you would write down everything you wanted Igor to do, and you'd write it down really precisely so that he would have to do exactly what you wrote down, right? And working with these IT guys, if you didn't write everything down really precisely, they're going to ask a whole bunch of nitpicky questions anyway. So write everything down really carefully. Okay. Third thing, you have no idea how long it should take Igor to do something, and you don't have any idea how much it should cost, right? So why don't you ask Igor how much he thinks it should cost and how long it should take and what milestones he's going to deliver on the way, and then force him to stick to that. At least that's something, right? This way he can't play with any hyperventilator, reticulation, yada yadas, because he won't have time, because he has to deliver on the schedule he said, right? So if you don't know anything about IT, that's a pretty good way to start controlling it. So this method of controlling IT, this is what we call waterfall. My point here is that waterfall is not a project management technique. It is a method, or developed as a method, for a business that was suddenly confronted by strange IT people to control IT, because you got it as a business somehow. So we developed this separation between something that we call the business and something that we call IT. And the business was on one side, and IT was on the other side, sort of like a contractor to the business, really was the relationship, right? There's a sort of arm's length relationship, and the idea is that the business would give a set of requirements to this contractor, get an estimate or a quote or something, and then get back a result at the end, hopefully, without having to pay any extra money for it. Now, we've grown up with this model, and because we're so used to it, we fail to see how strange it is. It's a really strange idea in that you have a part of your company, and you're saying that part of the company provides customer service to everybody else. And that part of the company is going to act like a contractor and deliver according to our requirements. So who goes to other people in their company and says, this is what I require? And that's a little bit odd, right? But it's normal to go to an IT organization and say that. Customer service, does marketing provide customer service to the rest of the business? Does finance provide customer service? This is a really odd model. The CIO is responsible for an organization whose responsibility is serve the rest of the business and deliver on time, essentially. Marketing, finance, no other part of the business is like that. We got sort of a weird dynamic. So now we try to introduce Agile Approaches, or DevOps. And we IT people say to the business, from now on, we're not going to have requirements documents. And by the way, we're not going to have deadlines anymore, and we're going to change the requirements all the time. And if we don't deliver what you were expecting, that's just because we did something different. And what's the first reaction that you get from the business folks? Well, it's obvious, I think, what that first reaction is going to be. It's, well, then how can we control things? You're saying you're going to just do whatever, and you're going to do it on whatever schedule you want, and so how are we going to have any control over what you're doing? The first obstacle that you have to a good Agile practice is not a project management issue so much as a, how do we control you? You know, this just doesn't satisfy me as a business person, because my whole goal in setting up this waterfall thing was to have a way to control people I don't understand. And now you're saying I'm not going to have any of those controls anymore. So that's a problem for me. But actually, over this period, since those first few days of IT, certain things have changed. One thing that's changed is the people that you see in an IT organization, in a business. I don't know if you look around, how many of them are like Igor? I mean, the people that I've worked with in IT organizations, for the most part, they love contributing to the business. They care about the business a lot. They understand the business probably better than a lot of the business people do, because their work goes across the entire business. They've had to think the business through very carefully. They do enjoy playing with technology. I mean, that's very motivating. But for the most part, when they're at work, they're trying to do what the company needs. At least those are the people that I've met, for the most part. And on the flip side, the business people, they've become a lot more tech savvy. They're all, they all have their devices and their computers at home. They're all using Google. They know what the cloud is. They know what a phishing email is and why they shouldn't click on it. So the business people are a lot more tech savvy. The tech people are a lot more business savvy. Actually, that's not quite true. So I knew Igor quite well because I worked with him. And I will tell you that Igor actually was extremely committed to the business. And when he, you came up to him as a manager, you said there's this emergency, we gotta fix it, and he looked off into space. He was looking off into space because he was trying to figure out what could be wrong and how it could be fixed. And when he built that hyperventilator masticator yada yada algorithm, he built it in order to speed up the payroll system, actually. There's just this communication problem, right? But I think Igor was very committed to the business all along. This distinction between IT people and business people was never a real distinction to begin with. But now, in the current business environment, it's almost impossible to maintain this separation between IT and the business and this arm's length distance between the two. And I'll explain in a couple of minutes why that is happening, why the model of a business has changed. But first I want to talk about Agile approaches for a second. So obviously, Agile ways of thinking are a big improvement over this waterfall control thing. I mean, now, instead of having the business prepare a requirements document and give it to the technologist, now we have a team, and the product owner figures out the requirements and gives them to the technologists. And we don't have a Gantt chart with milestones anymore. Instead, at the beginning of each sprint, the team commits to how much work they're going to do in the sprint. And then if they don't finish all the work in the sprint, well, somebody says, well, how come you committed to it? Every time, every sprint, you commit to more work and then you don't do it. And we have a metric, we have velocity. And so we can track the teams and how much they're producing. And if the velocity is 30 story points this sprint and it's only 20 story points next sprint, you can say, what's going on, guys? Are you building hyperventilator masticators or something, So what's the difference, really? We've gone from the business, whatever that is, preparing requirements and giving it to the technology team, to now a product owner who comes from the business, preparing requirements and giving it to the technology team. And we've gone from commitments on a big schedule to a small schedule. What we've really done, I think, is replicated the control model. essentially. So we've said now the business is in charge of business things. Technologists can't be expected to understand that. So a product owner is going to make all the decisions about what's valuable to the business, and the technology team is going to deliver the pieces of software that are requested. So their contribution is essentially an output, a piece of software. And then the product owner is going to take that to the business and use it to deliver business value. And the IT team is going to be responsible, essentially, for each sprint, producing this stuff and producing it quickly and on time. So we still have a separation of roles. We have the business on one hand, figuring out what's valuable, and essentially responsible for delivering value. And then we have the IT team, which is responsible for delivering product on a schedule as told to by the business and keeping the business happy. I think the big change when we moved from the waterfall to Agile is that we started to write the requirements on little index cards instead of in Word documents. I'm not sure that there's anything else in a sense. Because even though we made things small, essentially, we kept the underlying model, which is a model of control. And it's very hard to lose that. It's very hard to talk about IT in the business without using the words IT in the business, as if IT is not part of the business. I've tried it, because I wrote a book on this subject, and I constantly found myself talking about IT in the business and providing customer service to the business and so on. This is deeply embedded, let's say, in our way of thinking about technology. So in a sense, you could say our problem in causing transformation is that Igor is still part of the way of thinking of the technologists and the business. And it's very hard to lose Igor. All right, so what's changed though is the way that businesses have learned to think about requirements or about figuring out what they need to build. And I think that the big change was the book Lean Startup by Eric Ries. But that's just sort of one statement of the change. It's really permeated quite a lot of what has been happening in the business world, where the idea is if we're going to create a product for a market, we don't know in advance exactly what that product needs to be. And so we can't produce a set of requirements that's going to create that product that's going to add the customer value that we think it's going to. And we have to try experiments and get fast feedback from the market and analyze that feedback and use it to change what the product looks like. Well, a revelation, I think, over the last few years in the IT world has been that that doesn't just apply to external products, it applies to systems that are created for use within the company. And I mean that in this way. When we build an IT system, we have an idea of why we want that IT system, or when we add capabilities to an IT system, we have an idea of a business benefit that we really want to gain. And we have a hypothesis that this set of requirements or this set of features is going to deliver that business value. Now, actually, that's quite uncertain in most cases if you look at it and you say, are you absolutely sure that having that set of requirements or that set of capabilities is going to give you the business value that you want? So perhaps what the business is looking for is it wants to streamline a certain process that, let's say, takes an hour, and they want this business process to only take 50 minutes. And so they're going to build this IT system that's going to get the processing time from 1 hour to 50 minutes. How do you know, right? Best way to know is you try some experiments with the system, you see how much it reduces your time, you make some more changes, you get better and better at it, you get more exact. Same thing with products for the market. You get something into the market, you monitor how customers use it, you get feedback from the customers, you alter the product. Okay. So this more and more is becoming the model that businesses use to think about what they actually need. And when you're using that sort of a model, the most important factor for you is feedback time, or time to feedback, cycle time, essentially, or lead time. So If you're going to base your product on getting feedback in small increments, if it takes you 2 years to create a product, you're not getting feedback for 2 years, and you're risking all the money for those 2 years. If you can get a product to users in a day, and then start getting feedback, and then make some changes and get some more feedback a day later, it's a whole different story, right? You're going to be able to reduce your risk and move much more quickly to market. So lead time or cycle time becomes the most important factor. One of the factors that limits cycle time, or that makes it be longer than what you want, is handoffs. There are a number of lean principles about what the sources of waste in a process are. One of the biggest sources of waste is a handoff where some people are working on something and then they have to pass it to somebody else to work on. And the more of those handoffs you have, the slower your cycle time or lead time would be. In the DevOps world, this is one of the principles that lets us get product out very quickly, that lets us reduce cycle time. We eliminate the handoff between development and operations. And that traditionally has been a big bottleneck. There are other reasons why that handoff is a problem. But by putting development and operations on the same team, we can avoid that handoff between teams, and that's one of the factors that reduces cycle time. Where am I going with this? If you have the business, and you have IT, and you have a handoff between those two, you're not going to be able to get a really fast lead time and get products out to market or to users to test very quickly. That handoff becomes a big bottleneck, among others, of course. So ultimately, we have to find a way now where we can have IT and the business working together as a single unit, just like in DevOps we have development and operations working together as a single unit. In fact, we need the entire thing to be a single unit. We need biz DevOps. We need biz DevSecOps. What we need is empowered teams that include all of the functions that own getting a business result. Okay, so I've just walked you through sort of abstract chain of logic. I'm going to give you an example now of how this can work. But the goal here is that we're going to find a way that the business and IT are not two separate things. They're actually the same thing, and we lose that wording, business and IT. We eliminate the handoff, and we get rid of this crazy control thing that we've had in place. So let me tell you a little bit about what I did when I was CIO at US Citizenship and Immigration Services. So there we had, this was an IT group of about 2,000 people, about $600 million a year in budget. So it was a pretty hefty organization. And when we started to move to Agile practices, we had a lot of teams all working in parallel. And we had to figure out how to sort of govern the whole thing, right? How do you decide who's going to work on what, and how do you organize it, and how do you oversee it? At some point, we moved to the cloud. We moved to a DevOps approach. We were trying to keep up with all the best practices. We automated our testing. We automated security and compliance. We set up a model where every time a developer made a change, they checked it into version control. A big automated test suite took over, and the test suite included all the functional tests and included all the security tests and a bunch of compliance rules. And then we stood up a brand new test environment in the cloud, and we deployed to the test environment, and we ran a whole bunch of security tests there. And then we had automated deployments to production, all the magic of DevOps, right? That takes you from a developer making a change to getting it in front of users, and you can use all of those techniques to shrink that amount of time down to almost nothing. There are two other pieces, though. There's the amount of time it takes to develop the capabilities, the time that developers are taking to build something. And there's the time that it takes to figure out what needs to be built and design and capture the requirements for it. And to really squeeze down your lead time, you have to address those two things as well. And here's where the US government was terrible, really, on those things. We could build a DevOps environment. Nobody really cared if we did continuous delivery. But we had controls in place so that if we wanted to, let's say, develop a new capability, we had to start by going through an oversight process that involved writing 104 documents and going through 13 stage gate reviews. I'm not actually exaggerating, it probably sounds like I am. Through all these gate reviews, and then maybe we would need to get some infrastructure to build on, so we would go through a government procurement process and order the hardware and get it in the data center and rack and stack it and procure a contractor to do the setup and then some contractors to do the development. So I'm going to have to move the mic away from my mouth for a second here. So lead time looked like this, right? To get even the infrastructure into the data center, that often took us 9 months or so. To go through this oversight process and prepare the 104 documents, that took another 18 months typically. So in terms of cycle time to try to get something in front of users and get feedback on it, you were already starting with about 2 years of lead time before you actually even started doing something. The big game changer there was the cloud, obviously, where once we started moving to AWS, we were able to provision new environments in just minutes instead of waiting 9 months. We were able to set up the continuous delivery system. We were able to work in tiny pieces of requirements. We could do essentially one requirement at a time and push it through the process. And the smaller your batch size in a lean world, the faster your lead time. So just doing one requirement at a time, zip, out to production. Okay, so we were able to squeeze our lead time down to almost nothing there. But there's still that part where you're trying to figure out what needs to be done, and you're trying to prioritize the, I'll call them requirements, but in a second I'm going to tell you they're not really requirements. You have to prioritize those things that you want to do, and you have to have some oversight over the process, those controls that we talked about. So how can you do that in a way that's going to shrink that lead time down? And we tried a few different experiments, and the one that we wound up with is the one that I think is really powerful. And this is really what I want to try to suggest today, because I think it overcomes a lot of the problems that we've been talking about. So I need to give you a concrete example, really, to make this clear. We were responsible for an IT system called E-Verify, which in the United States is a system that employers can use to verify whether an employee is eligible to work in the United States. And E-Verify, it's not a requirement. Employers don't have to use it, generally. But with all the stuff that's going on about immigration, we figured it's only a matter of time before they make it mandatory for all employers to use. And in fact, our best political intelligence was telling us that that was going to happen. It hasn't yet, but probably will. And so, if all employers were required to use E-Verify, the scale at which it was used would go from this to this really quickly. So we knew we were going to have a big scalability challenge, and we knew we had to be prepared for it, because usually in the government, when they make a decision, then they say, okay, it has to be implemented in 30 days. That's what the new law says. So we knew that we had to be prepared for that to happen. And so we started to look at scalability of this system, and we realized the scalability challenge was not a technical challenge. The scalability problem was this. In about 98.6% of the cases, E-Verify could figure out whether somebody was eligible to work. In the other 1.4 or so % of the cases, a human being had to get involved to resolve the case. A human being could do about 70 cases a day. So if we suddenly had to scale up tremendously, our scalability problem was the human beings, really. Somehow we had to figure out how to get a lot more cases manually adjudicated than we were capable of. So we formulated a couple of business goals. One goal was that 98.6%, we had to make that a higher number. We had to get closer to 100% for automated resolution. Another was a person, a status verifier, could manage about 70 cases a day at the rate that they were working. We had to figure out how to put some tools in their hands so that they could do a lot more than 70 cases a day. There were 3 other goals. There were 5 altogether. And we decided that those were our requirements. We didn't need anything beyond that. The requirement was get that 98.6 to be a higher number, get the 70 cases per day to be a higher number. And we took each of those requirements and we passed it directly to a team. So we built a few teams that were technical people, business people, operators of the business. And in fact, as we realized, most of them had crossover skills. So it wasn't that a technical person was only technical. They had a pretty good understanding of the business. The business people had an okay understanding of the technology. The team as a whole had a pretty good understanding of the business and the technology. And when I say the technology, development, testing, operations, and all of those things. So a single cross-functional team. And then we would say to the single cross-functional team, your job is make that 70 cases per day be a higher number. Bye. We would say to another team, your job is make that 98.6% a higher number. Have fun. We didn't quite say, go off on your own. We said, come back every 2 weeks and tell us what the number is now. Now, since we were using a DevOps process, we could deliver really quickly. And so for me to say, come back in 2 weeks and tell me what the number is now, was not an absurd idea, because in 2 weeks they could actually release a bunch of code and make a bunch of business changes, just like that. And in fact, they did. So 2 weeks later, they would come back and say, hey, the 70 number is now 75, or something like that. And then 2 weeks after that, oh, 78. And it went like that. Every 2 weeks, they would come back and we would have a little discussion. What did you do that got it to 75? And what else did you try? They were also told when we first started, everything you do must be dedicated to that goal. Raising the 70 or raising the 98.6. Actually, the way I said it in my slightly more colorful way, I said, I can't, this is the government, I can't give you bonuses or anything, but for every 1 case per day you get over 70, I'm going to give you a little gold star. And if you do anything that's not going to raise the number of cases or not intended to raise the number of cases, we're going to take you outside and shoot you. Okay, that's the government way. But that's the idea, right? There's no scope creep here. There's no possibility of scope creep, because the team is only trying to get their metric to go or to accomplish their business outcome. That's the only goal they have, and as long as they're working towards it, it's fine. We also started by doing a little impact mapping exercise. Impact mapping is a technique that was written about by Gojko Ajic, a wonderful book. And the idea of impact mapping is you start with a goal and then you work backwards to what kinds of things might help you accomplish that goal. Or more precisely, you work backwards to what behavior changes on the part of users would accomplish that goal, and what IT capabilities can you create that would help those users change their behavior, etc. So we did that as sort of a brainstorming exercise, and for each of the goals, management and the team worked together to put together an impact map. Maybe if we give the status verifiers access to our cross-domain inquiry system, then they'll be able to get the information they need more quickly, and that will increase the number of cases. So we made a little map of all these different possibilities, and then we told the team, feel free to ignore the map, but here's something you might want to use. We've discussed this. Here's a bunch of ideas for you. Go ahead and explore different alternatives, but try to make sure that you do the things that are most likely to have an impact first, and then move on to the harder ones. So that way you'll get more gold stars, right? You get more gold stars quickly, and we won't have to take you outside and shoot you. Just use this to the extent that it's helpful. So each group went off with their goal, and actually we were very specific. We said, we don't care what your IT requirements are. We don't care what IT systems you build. In fact, if you can find a way to accomplish your goal without writing any code, great. I don't care. I want the number 70 to go up. You have business skills, you have technology skills. Show me the number going up, however you can do it. So they went off, and they would come back every 2 weeks and report. And since we also had to report up to overseers who managed this process with the 104 documents and the 13 gate reviews and so on, every month I would report to them the same thing. So I would say, well, look, now we got the 70 number to 90, and here's how much money we spent getting there. And the overseers at that point, or me every 2 weeks, would have the choice of continuing the investment or not continuing the investment. So maybe the team would say, well, we started at 70 cases a day. It's now been going up. It's now at 90 cases a day. Here's the graph. Essentially, over time, we've been able to make the number go like this. And so I would say to the overseers, here's that graph. I recommend that we keep investing in this goal because we're spending money and it's having a good return and it seems to be on the upswing, so let's keep putting money into it. With another one of the goals, what we saw was a graph that looked like this. It plateaued. And after talking to the team, I was able to verify that they were trying everything. They were trying a lot of things that made sense, but they couldn't make a dent in the number anymore. So I was able to go to the overseers and say, look, here's the graph. We've plateaued out. We're trying everything. It's not making a difference. I suggest that we stop investing in this goal and take the money and put it somewhere else, even though we were planning to spend more here. Oversight was tremendously happy about that, right? They of course agreed. We put the money into one of the other goals that we were getting a return on. So the upshot of it was that we had a lot of control over what was going on. We had control in the area that it actually mattered to us, which is accomplishing a business objective. The teams were not responsible for producing code based on requirements that somebody gave them. The teams were responsible, completely responsible for business outcome. They owned the entire thing. And the team was a cross-functional technology team and business team. So the magic of all of this is in a lot of ways, it got rid of that divide between IT and the business, and instead made a fully cross-functional team responsible for, made it the owner of a business outcome, gave it the power to produce that outcome while still having lots of oversight control and good control over the spending of the money. And I think it's that sort of an initiative. I'm sure there are lots of other models that could work. That's the one that happened to work for us. But models where it's not about a business that somehow doesn't include IT and an IT organization whose job it is to satisfy the business. Instead, both the business people and the IT people are trying to satisfy business objectives, strategic business objectives. And they're doing it based on their specialties. So just like CFO's organization are experts in finance and CMO's organization is experts in marketing, CIO's organization is experts in technology. When you put together all those experts, they come up with lots of good ideas, and it's no longer a matter of customer service or arm's length relationships. So I think we're in a position now as an industry or as a functional specialty where we have to change, not just move to DevOps and not just move to Scrum and Agile practices. In order to actually get the business impact out of that, we have to figure out how to get rid of this control way of thinking that evolved because of Igor, because of the way technologists were first perceived, in order to really get the benefit of DevOps and agility, and in order to carve out the space where we can do these things, we're going to have to change the way of thinking. And techniques like the one I just described help change the way of thinking. But I think even more immediately, we all have to stop accepting this distinction between IT and the business. Almost everything we talk about, everything we say, emphasizes this distinction, right? We say, business is our customer, we're going to have to wait for the business to give us requirements, we can't do anything until we get the requirements. You know, those ways of talking, those all reinforce this old model where we have a business and IT, and the business is trying to control IT. So for all of us in the room, if we're on the technology side, on the business, I think it's important that we think every day, really, as we execute our roles in the IT world, are we reinforcing this old way of thinking, even if we move to an agile process, move to DevOps, or are we taking ourselves to the next level, taking ourselves into the future, where IT and the business are one thing and are working together to accomplish business outcomes? And that is what we have to be doing, I think, right now, because we're at that transitional stage where we need to find a way to accomplish our transformations and actually get their business impact. So thank you all.